My name's Joe Cornish. It's lovely to be back in Scarborough. The last time I was here, it was the opening of this event, which is spectacular, if I may say so.
Thank you.
It really was wonderful. I'd like to make the point, first of all, that I'm a working photographer, as is Dave, in our own different ways. And we both have a great passion for the fine arts in general and using our photography as a form of self-expression. And I think that hopefully we'll see from what Dave tells us about today what that means to him and how he integrates the two, the notion of fine art and the rather technical process that is photography. And my questions are going to be designed to bring that out as far as possible. Prior to this exhibition, your previous one was also black and white, completely different workflow. But it does suggest that there is a kind of linking theme through your personal work of black and white. Can you tell us a bit more about that?
Of course, yeah. I was hooked on black and white because you can develop it, you can print it yourself. You don't have to, but I enjoyed doing that and learning wet techniques. And as soon as you photograph anything and take away the colour, make it monochrome or black and white, then it suddenly become abstract instantly before you even applied any creative technique. The very fact that it's monochrome, and it amazes me how we all seem to accept monochrome and black and white as being true or real, and it's totally abstract. We don't see like that, we see in colour. But take colour away, and suddenly as a photographer you have more, I think, freedom, creative freedom to express the subject and the tonal values, because who knows how dark the sky was, or how bright the highlight on a tree was. The colour information has been removed and you're left with an abstract expression of the world through black and white.
This is a subject really dear to my heart. What about the view camera? I think Dave should tell us a little bit about what it's like to use a 10:8 view camera.
A pain in the neck, literally. This, may I stand up? Just want to show, this is my beard off. This made every negative that made every print in this exhibition. And it might look like it's out of the arc, but it's actually quite new. It was made in the 1950s, I think 1954. But it's big, and that's a bit of a drawback. It falls down into a lovely, delightful little box and goes into a backpack, and I cart it around. And it isn't that heavy, but I had to use this camera because of the contact element, putting the negative on the black paper. So I had to make my negative big. You have a lens at one end, and you place light-sensitive material at the other, film, colour film, transparency. Funnily enough, you have smartphones, your iPhones. Every camera we use today is exactly the same design as this. There's no electrics, no calibration, no measure, no help. You're composing by eye. It's upside down, the image, because there's no prism. It's a prism in our modern cameras that invert the image and make it look correct. And you can't really see a thing, hence you have to go under your dark cloth and look even more archaic. And it kind of amuses me because I like the iPad. I see people shooting and I kind of think they're kind of using a Deerdorf because they're like that and they're aiming. And I think all you need really is some bellows and a dark cloth, and then you'll be able to see what they're doing. Because I can't see my iPhone when I'm shooting in the sunlight. So that's why you need the dark cloth. And the best camera in the world is this, and your eyes. And if you just frame the world however you want to see it, with a long lens, or with a wide angle lens, and just take time to at least work out in your mind what you want, then the camera comes out if it's right. Then you place it exactly where your eye was, you make the final creative decisions, load your film, and make an image. Did that answer it?
Brilliant, absolutely fantastic. Yeah, I'm actually real music to my ears because almost everything you said, I've said to workshop groups before.
Pre-visualisation to me is the key to any creative statement. I think you've got to have a vision in your mind's eye really before you can express it.
You know, that's the confidence of having made lots and lots of mistakes, as we both have, having grown up in the days of film, means that you have a pretty clear idea of what's actually going to come out at the other end. And it is a striking contrast between the digital process where you can edit on the run. This process requires that you suspend your fulfillment, gratification, if you will, until you get the film processed. If you don't have that confidence that it's going to come out, that you've got something exciting, you're probably not going to do it. Now the next question deals with the process that Dave uses, and part of the deal was that you gave me a full-on, fully immersed carbon printing masterclass out in the field to creating the final print, and I can tell you it takes 36 hours minimum to do that. Astonishingly complex, and it is absolutely fascinating. How on earth you do demos here, I don't know, because I would imagine they take 36 hours, but
it's the work of a madman.
Right. But the carbon process, as we're going to discover, is quite involved, and I'd really like to ask you directly now, what is the appeal of the carbon process?
Carbon printing was invented in the 1860s, and I guess photography had been around 40-ish years, and it was a new modern process. Portrait photographers in particular latched onto it because it offered a permanence. They knew they could make permanent prints that could be handed down generations, family portraits and such. In essence, you start with photogelatin and you mix pigment into that gelatin. Traditionally, this is black pigment, lamp black or Indian ink, which use basically soot, which is carbon. That's where the black comes from. And as carbon is the most stable element in the universe, or one of the most, carbon prints made of carbon are totally permanent. One extra ingredient that made these pictures so unusual was I chose to grind charcoal sourced from the local forest that I was shooting, and that played total havoc with the tonal scale, and I nearly gave up and went back to pure pigment. Because as a photographer, I think we're all probably control freaks, and I like to get total control out of how dark, how light. And something happened whereby I just thought the charcoal's given the image of the strength. The imperfection, as I did call it, I'd now call it process, because it is part of the process, gave these images the strength I think they have. But back to the process itself, you basically have a black pigment, which is carbon, say Indian ink in gelatin. You coat that onto a piece of paper. That gives you something called carbon paper, a black sheet of paper. When you sensitize that with a chemical agent that makes it UV sensitive, I use potassium dichromate, that's when the magic begins to happen, because it then becomes light sensitive. Then you simply place a negative of your desired size to make your image, and the size of the negative will dictate the size of the print, and that's purely and simply because it's a contact process. And when light passes through the negative and hits the black carbon, the light bites into the gelatin, it tans it, it hardens it, it makes it insoluble. And there lies in the crux, the total crux of carbon printing. Because gelatin, the gelatin we eat with our ice cream or in our trifles, dissolves at 37.5 degrees. If you stop it from dissolving, i.e. harden it with light, it'll stick to something and stay. And that's kind of as simple as I can make it. So as light passes through the neg, the negative density transforms itself onto the paper, and then you're left in essence with a one-off, one-use only printing plate. It's not copper, it's paper. That's ready to be transferred. The image is ready, the jelly image, the black gelatin image, is ready to be transferred onto metal, paper, glass, plastic. For the show I chose to use Velinarche, handmade cotton rag. It's a beautiful handmade paper, the choice of a lot of printmakers, photographers. I just liked it because it had the right weight, the right colour, and I love the decal edging. So our transfer of the black jelly paper onto, in my case, the Velinarche, takes place in water. And as you heat the water up and get to that magic 37.5 degrees, you get the jelly or gelatin dissolving, and a black gunky mess emerges around the carbon plate, the paper. And after about 3 or 4 minutes, you can peel away, rather like peeling a Polaroid print from the negative. You peel away the carbon paper, and you're left with one of those little black pieces of paper on the floor, which I'm sure you all saw if you've been to the show or you look at after the talk. But then if you're patient and you keep rocking away gently and heat the water up to perhaps 40, 42 degrees, the gel keeps dissolving, and then the magic, total magic moment where you see the first remnants of a photographic image appearing through a black, cloudy, gunky mess is your carbon print being developed. And as you keep clearing the water to clean, development is over, hang it to dry, and you have a carbon print, a totally permanent photograph.
Well, I think that's fascinating. I mean, I think your passion for it comes across so well from that description. It is very well described. It is a very hard process to describe, I think, if you haven't seen it. But it is fascinating, and if Dave obviously had a chance, I can recommend it. You are a commercial studio photographer. I don't know how many of you know Dave's work. I'm sure many of you do, and that is, on the face of it, the complete opposite of what we see in here today. I'm really interested to know, your artwork explores nature and landscape, and as we're going to find out, it also explores the process. Do you feel that one is more important than the other, the subject matter or the process?
You know, I just love making images, and I'm a photographer because I love it, and I really count myself as very fortunate. I can carve out a living doing something I love. There's good jobs and bad jobs. Commercially, I get a lot of pleasure. I do a lot of work for the drinks industry, supplying advertising for their websites and brochures. And I kind of think I'm quite good at making wine bottles look sexy. I don't know if that's the right description, but I seem to be quite good at it. And I almost get a thrill, as much a thrill as creating a 10:8 negative and making a black and white landscape. They kind of both help me to be a more rounded photographer, I feel.
This is something that we share, a love of nature, working outside, and the word that springs up time and time again, and this is true I think for many artists, is connect, is connection with the subject matter. And you've got some really interesting ways that you do this, so would you like to tell us about that?
We race around, I'm guilty of this also, but if I'm in the Highlands, you're usually racing to get to your destination. So what I started doing, maybe a bit extreme, but purposely pull off at the nearest lock or car park area where I knew there was a nice grassy knoll I could just rest my head, take some time out, usually have a coffee on the trangia, maybe a bite to eat, and then just either nap, or if it was the summer in particular, go for a swim, freshwater swimming, and just let all that kind of race and rush drift away. And then suddenly, especially after a nap, a 10-minute nap, you suddenly feel part of the landscape, and then you can begin to work, and kind of almost like an awakening. You've left the city behind and you're ready to work.
The concept for the show is carbon to carbon, and when I first saw that and read about it, I was struck by the thought that there were two elements to the concept, whether it is mainly philosophical or environmental or both.
The catalyst behind the whole project was originally, could I make images using part of the subject in the image to kickstart the project? And then it all seemed to gel in terms of, well, I'm going to go for it. I'm going to find a charcoal maker and I'm going to try and make my own pigment from scratch and make photographs with that pigment. If I was taking an image up in Sordon when we had the snow a couple of years ago, just turned off the road, maybe a wee bit too fast, we're talking 10 miles an hour here, through quite deep snow, and just kind of aquaplaned into a drift, and thought, dash, I'm stuck. All wheels were spinning, so I had to start digging out, and the light was failing, and the shot was up the road. And a yellow Defender appeared, and a rope was thrown out. No words were passed. I hooked up, he dragged me out, and I said, thanks very much, I'm David, I'm a photographer. And he said, you're welcome, I'm Dave, the charcoal maker. Excuse me? I make charcoal. You make charcoal? I make charcoal. And he made charcoal about a quarter of a mile from where I'd run into that drift. And we went back to and had tea. I showed him the Deerdorf. I explained my project. He brought me a wonderful sack of dust and said, here you go, mate, have a go. So there I was off, up and running. The process was launched. I could put my own pigment from the subject I chose to photograph into my photographs. And it developed kind of slowly from there to the final prints that you see around you today?
Well, I must say, I thought that reply was pure poetry. That was it's a fascinating insight. Your passion is absolutely clear. You really do describe it fascinatingly. As I said, it really was poetry, that last reply. So just want to say big thanks, Dave, and congratulations on a great show.
Thank you, Joe.